Hello, Mr. Cropper. Very interesting subject. Let me first tell you, I've had the flu, and while yesterday, when I could start to breathe again, I like to think that I was getting better. I'm still very sick, turns out. So if it's hard to watch this video, just tell me. I'll re-record it later. So for those able to take it. Okay, a couple things about the senses. Now, I believe all knowledge comes from perceptions. And because of basically cognitive science, the fact that we are sense and motor, the brain is a sense and motor controller, that everything comes from. So you know what I mean. So let's pretend you're getting information as far from the senses as you can imagine. You're asleep. You're dreaming of totally imaginary things, like unicorns, fairies. Except for fairies are little tiny girls with bug wings. Unicorns are horses with horns. You know, it all ultimately comes from the senses. Okay, so that's why you're going to be correct in that part of it. But you say sense perceptions, okay? The problem is that knowledge comes from perceptions, and we don't really know which ones are sense perceptions, right? Let's be fair. I mean, I like what you said about it. You're saying the senses don't distort reality. First, I was already going, "Ooh, wait a minute." But you said no. They report how reality is working on them. That's true. So if that doesn't count as a distortion, fine. Instead, we call it an indirection, right? So if you have colorblind eyes, and your eyes say, it's white over there, well, maybe it's bright red. But it could be bright yellow or something. All you really know, it's bright. Okay. It's telling you how it acts on it. But see, every indirection is also a distortion. Every time you do a conversion like that in an electrical system or any kind of system, that's where your noise and friction are introduced. Okay. And so I want to also give you this example. And by the way, you and I go a long way in the same direction on a topic like this. But where we'll be different is how we argue for our knowledge. You want to say that it's totally non-distorted, meaning it's real and I can just trust it. And yet you also know that you have to think about the bent stick. You have to decompose. I mean, see, I liked all of that. The fact that, okay, if you push your eye and things change, well, that's not your eye not telling you what's happening. That's what happens when you change the shape of your lens or push on your retina. So I like that idea that it's not a distortion in that sense. It's really telling you how it's reacted to some stimuli. But how it's reacted to the stimuli is not the stimuli itself. You can always improve and triangulate. Anyway, I wanted to give you this example. This example I always use. Because I'm an empiricist and a materialist, and I want to base all my true knowledge on sense perceptions. The difference between you and me is how do we get to know what the sense perceptions are? I think it's more complicated than you. But maybe not, actually. Maybe not. It's not impossible that you actually do see how complicated it is. But when you look in the sky and see a cloud, and there's a face in the cloud, sure, you could sit there and look for faces in the clouds, but I mean when you look up and it's like, wait, that looks like Alfred Hitchcock, without thinking of it, that comes to you as if from the senses, okay? It's one of those immediate things. Now, it is a result of processing, but hey, all the imaging is a result of processing, right? We have two eyes. We aren't looking at two pictures. They're processed and put together. Okay. The point is, before we put our analytic thinking on top of it, we see this face. And when we put the analytic thinking, we say, yeah, it looks like a face, but we know that's imaginary. That face is from her. And we don't say it doesn't exist at all. We like, oh, look, it's my grandma. Yeah, I often see her face because I just love her. I see her face everywhere. You know? So we know it's psychological and is real in that sense, okay? But it's not sense perception because, no, it's not, the cloud isn't a face. Whereas when you see a real face, you have a kind of an alternate problem. It really is a face, and yet again, is it a face? I mean, it's an object in space that we want to call a face because it has a certain pattern. But if a certain pattern is a face, then maybe the cloud is a face, but other people wouldn't see the face. And so, basically, when we want to break it down to sense perceptions, when we want to talk about these basic facts of color and things like that, the senses present it to you with a lot of interpretation, arbitrary amount of interpretation that you then have to rationalize. And that's where maybe we will agree, because I like that. I wasn't sure who you were reading, but even if it was Ayn Rand, I like that take on that's an ancient example of the bent stick. And that's was always my answer is, your senses are not lying to you. Your senses are telling you the stick is straight and water refracts light. It's telling you two things at once together in the bent stick. Okay. Cheers. I haven't watched your second one yet. I'm going to watch it, but I just figured I had enough to answer the first one. Since it isn't really an answer, it's sort of also an addition of some sense perception issues.